The 608th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play, stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you guys live on a Friday night. A little over 2 hours since Carolina secured a massive win at home over Kansas in the Dean E. Smith Center, and we're here to talk about it. We are posted up in our room. After going to the game, we did the media thing tonight. Shout out to Sports Radio 92.7 WFNZ, Steve Kirshner, the UNC SID, for making that possible, getting us squared away at the last possible second, and allowing us to be in the building tonight for a game that, I don't think many Carolina fans would have wanted to miss if given the opportunity to be there, because this was a spectacle. This was, in my opinion, the two best programs in college basketball going toe-to-toe. And the game certainly lived up to it with a bunch of high-level play on both ends of the court. And we're here to talk about it because it's a massive win for Carolina. It's a massive win for Hubert Davis, and it really sets the tone for what this 2025-2026 season could be for Carolina. So just to kind of, set the scene for the win, Carolina beats Kansas 87-74. They improved now to 2-0 on the young season. The first win over Kansas since they beat the Jayhawks back in the preseason NIT all the way back in 2002. Before tonight's win, Matt Doherty was the last Carolina coach to beat Kansas, but now that title belongs to Hubert Davis. And, it wasn't always pretty for Carolina. They trailed 37-29 at the break, but they outscored Kansas 58-37 in the second half, where they shot 24 of 36 from the field in the second stanza. At one point, they were shooting over 75%. And as you could argue, it was either the best half that Carolina has played or the second best half Carolina has played under head coach Hubert Davis. A big reason why Carolina trailed at the break. Sloppy turnovers and poor perimeter shooting allowed Kansas to build the lead. Carolina turned it over 10 times. That led to 17 points for Kansas, and the Heels just 3 of 15 from behind the three-point line in the first half, but that would all be erased by that dominant second half. All in all, 4 UNC starters scored in double figures. led once again by Caleb Wilson, who was the best player on the floor. He had 24 points on 9 of 12 shooting. And so, when you just look at this win, you look at this game, just a lot to be excited about, a lot to be proud about. And it just felt good, man, as big as this game was to see Carolina not play great, but to see them battle back and play the way they played in the second half and look like the team that we thought they could look like all season long, an offensive juggernaut where they were just scoring at will. They were competing defensively. They were getting stops. They were getting turnovers. It looked like Carolina basketball. It felt like Carolina basketball, and that's as much fun as we've had this early on in the season watching this team and program play. And it felt really good to finally get a win over a team that's caused so many Carolina fans heartbreak over the last 25 years or so.
Well, that was the main thing, right? Is that, this is a program that has really had Carolina's number for so long. And so, tonight it felt like this was the best opportunity that you had. It was in the Smith Center. Your fans were ready for this game. I mean, as ready for this game as any other game this year besides the Duke game. And I thought the environment was fantastic. I thought, Carolina responded in that second half the way that they needed to. And, man, it feels really good to be sitting here talking about a win over Kansas. We cannot stress this enough. Guys, this is a massive, massive win for Hubert Davis. He needed this one more than just about anybody. And ultimately, I don't know where this season is going to go, but it's off to a hell of a start. And that was really all that we were asking, was there are limited opportunities that you're going to have in the non-conference this year. This isn't like years past where you're going to be thrown a bunch of these opportunities. You're going to play in, whatever preseason tournament that you're playing in, and Carolina is going to get a great chance to really stack up some wins. No, you've got 3 opportunities in the non-conference, maybe a fourth. Maybe Georgetown has popped up as a fourth. This was the one at home, with Georgetown being at home too. But this felt like the one. And Carolina in the first half, it felt like a team that was a little nervous. They came out, started a little slow, turning the ball over. You have Caleb Wilson that really settles into the game and gets you, competing in that first half. But then, man, he picks up his second foul, going down the stretch of that first half. All of a sudden, you're looking at it and you're like, just don't let this lead balloon to too big of a margin. Carolina does a great job of keeping it relatively close at 8 points. And in that second half, I just love the way they were attacking the rim to start out that second half. I thought that really changed their mindset throughout that entire second half. And, what a huge win this is for this program. What a huge win it is for Hubert Davis. And I could not be happier that we got to cover it tonight and that we're talking to you guys here on this edition of the podcast after a win.
Well, I think what kept Carolina in the game were 2 things that I think you expect this team to do when they take the floor. You expect them to compete defensively, and this team is going to get to the board. They're going to rebound the freaking ball. And that's why they were in the game. And it really showed their maturity. For a young group, a group that's got thrown together with 11 newcomers, but there was never a sense of panic. There was never a sense of, oh crap, we're down 8. I got to go get it all back in this one possession. And that speaks volumes to the players and the coaching staff, because it felt like last year when Carolina would get in these situations, you tried to get it all back at once, and you can't do that. It's a 40-minute game. There's going to be 80 possessions or so. So you got plenty of time. And I thought the fact that Carolina never panicked allowed them to stay within the game. I thought, when you had to put Caleb Wilson and Seth Trimble on the bench with 2 fouls, you needed guys to come in and make plays. And you got a 3 from Zayden High. You got some steady minutes from some other guys off the bench that the stat sheet's not going to suggest that they played at a high level or they impacted the game, but you didn't have that a year ago. You didn't have that ability to turn to your bench and keep yourself close. That's why Carolina would get down 18, 20 points and then have to crawl all the way back into the ball game. And so, I looked at you at halftime and said, look, I thought we played like crap. I thought we shot the ball terribly and we were down 8. And that's going to be the tale of what this team does, because the way that they're built, the way that they're constructed, they're not always going to shoot the ball efficiently. So what are you doing when the ball's not going into the basket? And I think what we've learned about this group, because they didn't shoot it well in the 2 exhibitions from behind the 3-point line, didn't shoot it well the other night, they're going to do the other things that keep them in the game, to keep the game close. And then when it all comes together, you saw what Carolina was able to do. It was times it was not competitive in the second half, where Carolina just simply ran right by Kansas. And they were getting to the rim at will. And some of it was, yes, some great X's and O's, but some of it was just some basic offense that Carolina was able to execute. And it really just fueled, the win in a massive way for Carolina. And so it was only game 2, but this game was going to tell us a lot about this team. And we learned a lot about them tonight. And the good thing is, a lot about what we learned is positive and not so and not necessarily negative. Let's take a look at the box score here. It's a pretty one for Carolina. They shoot 52% from the field. They were 34 of 66. Meanwhile, Kansas shot just 45%. Carolina, for the game, only shoots 30% from behind the 3-point line, 8 for 27, but the threes that they made were timely, and they were always in the midst of runs that got them back into the game or runs that allowed them to take over the game. Kansas, though, did shoot well from behind the arc. They were 12 of 25 for 48%. Both teams left points at the foul line. The Heels just 11 of 17 from the free throw line. Kansas just 10 of 15 from the foul line. So both teams would like to clean that area up. Turnovers, 11 turnovers for Carolina, led to 19 points for Kansas, but the Heels forced 14 turnovers, scored 14 points off of them. I mentioned the rebounding. That's what kept them in the game in the first half. Carolina plus 12 on the glass, 39-27. They won the defensive glass 23-20, and they won the offensive glass 16-7, even though Kansas got more second chance points off their offensive rebounds. They won that category 10-6. They won the bench points as well, 21-11. How about points in the paint? Carolina plus 28 in that category. They outscored Kansas 48-28 in the painted area. Fast break points 14-6 in favor of Carolina. 3 blocks for Kansas against 2 for the Heels. 9 steals for Carolina, just 6 for the Jayhawks. And the Heels had 16 assists on 34 made baskets. So nearly 50% of their baskets were assisted on. On the other side, Kansas, 14 assists on their 26 made baskets. So that's a look at the box score. With that, we'll now transition to the quote of the game. We got 2 quotes we're going to bring from you. We'll start with head coach Hubert Davis. And I'll read that quote where he, when he met with the media, not when he met with Jones Angel on the Tar Heel Sports Network, but he told the media, quote, "I won't remember the score, but I'll remember the smiles on their faces and them jumping around in the locker room," end quote. There's already some video evidence of that locker room where, he got doused in water. It's a long-standing tradition at Carolina when they secure big wins that they get in the mosh pit and they jump around and they celebrate. And he's going to make it about the kids. And ultimately, that's what it should be about. The kids were the ones that played the game. They're the ones that executed. But what we talked about so much, once this team got put together and Carolina started putting the players in behind the microphone, Wilson, Trimble, whoever it was, they all talked about wanting to win for their coach because they know what this season means. It's a proverbial make or break season. Hubert Davis has to win. Hubert Davis has to deliver because that's what this program expects. Tonight was really big for him. And I think you could tell that he knew it. That was as animated as you've seen Hubert Davis on November 7th. And I'm not going to say that smile that you see in that postgame locker room was a smile of relief, but I do think it was a joyful night for him because had this gone the other way, I mean, even though it had only been game 2, what's the conversation? The conversation would be, well, Carolina got out coached. They don't have the right guy for the job. That conversation would have started tonight. And so while Hubert Davis is going to remember the smiles on his kids' faces, and he needs to, I hope he remembers the smile on his face, because tonight was a really big win for him as well.
Take a moment and soak it in, because this is what needed to happen. Was you needed to find a way to win this game, because the narrative would have been you got out coached in a game at home against a coach that in the last 28 games coming into this game was 15-13. Kansas, I mean, they are not the same Kansas that we've been used to these last few years. We've thought to ourselves that, yes, this is a team that still, it deserves to be ranked to start the season, but they're not playing great basketball. And Carolina tonight, came in a first half that didn't go their way, but that second half they really responded. And so, this team, I'm going to tell you, this is a team that looks like it's fighting for their head coach. And they know that their head coach needs them to perform well this year in order to keep his job moving forward. I know that's a lot of pressure on these guys, but this is a group that seems to embrace that pressure. The pressure of bringing Carolina basketball back to where we're used to it being at. The pressure of their head coach being on a little bit of a proverbial hot seat. Again, we don't know how hot that seat actually is, because the university hasn't come out and told us, hey, man, this guy's actually on the hot seat. He's in a make or break year. But just from what we can base it on, what we see in, the temperature around the fan base, it feels like it's at that point. And tonight, he did a really great job, I think, of coaching. He brings that energy. And this is a group that I think is really going to respond to that energy that he brings on the sideline. I think they need that type of coaching, because this year, one thing that we talked about last year was, where was the extension of Hubert Davis on the floor? This year, it's your freshman that's the extension of Hubert Davis on the floor. It's your true freshman star, Caleb Wilson, who's willing to dive on the floor for loose balls, who's willing to get physical, scream and yell when he makes plays. And, you see it a little bit with Henry Visar too. You see that excitement that you need to be able to play the game with. So I love the makeup of the squad. I think this is a group that can get it done, and they're playing hard for their head coach, man. And that really matters, especially in a season that's as important as this.
You mentioned Caleb Wilson, tone setter tonight, was the best player on the floor, and that included Darren Peterson, who was absolutely phenomenal at times for Kansas. But, Caleb Wilson hit another gear, and once he got to that gear, Kansas had no answer for him. And he's also becoming quickly a soundbite, where he's going to talk during the game and he's going to talk after the game. Here he is in his post-game media session with a good colleague of ours, a good friend of ours, Vashti Hurt from over at Carolina Blitz, where he talks about having a wall screen that he changes more every game to get him motivated and really pissed off. And that fueled what he did tonight for Carolina.
I've been disrespected in polls and things like that. People telling me I'm not a top 3 freshman in the ACC, so I'm just gonna keep going out here and killing people. I got a list on my phone, and it's nowhere near done. So just gonna keep happening.
How many people on the list or things on the list?
It's a list every game. People think I joke when I say I put stuff in my wallpaper from my phone, but I put stuff on my wallpaper before I play to make sure I'm pissed.
What was on your wallpaper today?
My wallpaper today was my feeling after the McDonald's All-American game when I didn't touch the ball. So, and Darren Peterson was on my team. So that was my wallpaper.
So this was real personal.
Yeah.
Don't know when's the last time Carolina had a freshman that talked as much as Caleb Wilson does. But when I tell you that I can't get enough of this and that I eat this up, I'm look at it. Look, that's where it's all going. I can't get enough of what this kid does and what this kid brings. Because he's talked a lot since he arrived on campus about being the guy that's going to restore Carolina basketball. He was on set with Schulman and Billis saying, I want to be a legend. Want to be a legend, you got to win big games. This was a big game. I went out there, I delivered, and I'm starting to write my legacy. There's a confidence with him that doesn't borderline on arrogance, and that's the difference with him, where he's just so daggum confident in who he is and what he's going to bring. And what separates him and what makes him so much fun to watch is, yes, he's got God-given ability, and he can do things on a basketball court I wish I could have done. But he plays with a level of competitiveness that you cannot question how much he loves the game, how much he loves his team, how much he loves the program, and it's backing up all the talk that he's asserted, whether it's on social media or now whenever he's behind the microphone talking with reporters. And so, he was sensational tonight. I thought his energy changed the game because he was the one diving on the floor for loose balls.
Yep.
He was the one that was challenging shots at the rim. He was the guy that was willing to sacrifice his body. And when your best player is doing that, it makes it easier for all the other guys to line up in a line and do the same thing for him because he's willing to be the soldier that this team needs him to be when they go to war. And so, I mean, it's only 2 official games into his freshman season. We've seen him play 4 times because of 2 exhibitions. But I don't know if there's a ceiling on his potential. We could be looking at, when this is all said and done, as decorated a freshman in the history of Carolina basketball. And that's saying something.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at a guy that cocould be nearly as decorated as Tyler Hansborough. And if he gets to that point, I mean, that is crazy to think that. I mean, when we were talking about it earlier today on the show that I produce and co-host on Fridays on WFNZ, when this is the most hyped we've been for a UNC freshman since when? And, we said Kobe White because I think Kobe White's season kind of gets downplayed a little bit. But, I mean, is it Hansborough? Are we at that point right now as we sit here tonight after that game that he just put out there? Because he was the best player on the floor, hands down. It wasn't even close. And I thought Darren Peterson played really well.
Yes.
But I don't think that it was even close. When you look at just how impactful a player was on both ends of the floor, and that's the thing that I love about him. And, dude, I don't know what the hell Chris Spatola watched, but whatever he watched, he must have been watching the wrong kid. I don't know if you popped in the wrong tape or what happened. This kid is going to play every single game like it's his last. That's what we've seen so far, the first 4 games that we've seen from him. And, yeah, I'm counting the exhibitions because those do matter. They play them like they matter. I really like everything that we've seen from him. There's nothing that you can really downplay from what he's done. And I know there are people that are going to want to downplay some of what he's done because, well, it's early in the season. People are still trying to figure him out, all that. The kid's got talent in certain areas that I don't think teams are going to be able to slow him down in. And that's what I think is amazing about him. But, yeah, the compete level on the floor, the extension of Hubert Davis, the leadership that you're seeing already from him, that's what's different about him. And that's where having that confidence is so key. We wanted a guy like that to emerge last year from some of the younger guys on this team because we weren't necessarily seeing the vocal leadership from some of the older guys on the team. We never saw it. If Caleb Wilson was on last year's team, they would have been a heck of a lot better because they needed that leader out there, and they've got that now. And I love what I'm seeing from them from that area as well because it's, as you said, when he's playing hard out there, when he's diving on the floor for the loose ball, pulling down these rebounds, getting fired up, that's contagious. And you could see that his teammates responded to that. So I said it after, the quote that he had right there. I mean, I love this kid. I love what he brings to the table because Carolina needed somebody like this. They needed him to be this freshman, and he has been phenomenal.
And what's scary for the college basketball world is he's just scratching the surface of what he can and will be as an offensive player because it's raw. He wasn't the top 3 freshman because his offensive game isn't as defined as Devance's at BYU's, Peterson's at Kansas, maybe even Boozer's at Duke. It was a lot of just raw athleticism, but you could tell that he's in the gym and he's working because that mid-range game it's even further advanced than I thought it'd be this time. He had a move tonight where he literally he just pivoted his foot, but created separation and rose above a defender and put the ball right in his mouth and got fouled. and his touch around the rim, wherever he just wants to glide, because he can take 2 steps and cover 15 feet and then just lay it in. It's really impressive, and he's never going to be satisfied. That's the Hansborough thing that really stands out. Like, that's where that comparison maybe comes into, because Hansborough was never satisfied. He played every game like it was his last. He competed no matter what the score was. You get that same feeling right now from Caleb Wilson.
Fiery competitor for sure.
So it's been a lot of fun to watch, and guys, you better enjoy it, because he's only going to be in Chapel Hill for 1 year. Yeah. But the more that he plays and the better he gets, the higher Carolina's ceiling will grow as the season does move along. We'll transition now to the stat of the game. A lot of different ones I could have went with, but I went with turnovers. And I broke it down like this. Carolina had 10 turnovers in the first half, but they committed just 1 in the second half. On the flip side, Kansas turned it over 6 times in the first 20 minutes, but they turned it over 8 times in the second 20 minutes. And that really was what was allowed Carolina to get out and run and get it, the game up and down the floor, and get the pace where Carolina wanted it at, because simply put, that outside of the poor shot selection, the turnovers were really what fueled Kansas in the first half. Scored 17 points off 10 turnovers.
Yep.
How many times were they able to run down the other way? And even if it wasn't an initial bucket in transition, they got into a secondary break offense, and they were scoring without Carolina's defense being set. And truth be told, when you turn it over 10 times, you probably should be down more than 8. And I bet you Kansas and their coaching staff were worried, because they knew Carolina was not going to play that poorly again in the second half. I'll revisit some comments that Hubert Davis said in his post-game press conference. He really applauded his team for being able to take the coaching they were being given at halftime and apply it as quickly as they did in the second half. They didn't come outside of the tunnel until under 3 minutes to go before the second half got underway. So there was a butt chewing, and there was some hard conversations going on. How are you going to respond? And I think, and this is what you like about this group is coachable. This isn't going to be a group that when Hubert gets in their face, when Jeff Lebo, whoever it is, when they get in someone's face, they're going to sit there, pout, whine, and cry and want to transfer. They're going to take the coaching honestly, because they know that they're trying to make them better. And so I think that's a real early trait that we can see from this team and trust about this team, because there are going to be halves when it's not going to look pretty. But can you go into the locker room and can you correct it? And that's what they did tonight. And the limiting the turnovers was a big reason why that offense played at such a high level in the second 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, when you're not turning the ball over, giving them easy opportunities, because the thing was you were turning the ball over, and you were turning the ball over at the top of the key, on the elbow. It was too easy for Kansas to be able to get out and run, and they were getting those transition baskets, and that was what was really hurting Carolina. I mean, I think in the second half, you just saw that they valued the ball a lot more, and the biggest thing was your point guard settled into the game. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But when your point guard is the guy that's settled into the game, that's what really changes everything. And some of the looks that they were getting early on at the basket, to start the second half, led to some of those easy looks. That you love the passing that you saw in the second half from Carolina. It's selfless basketball, but it was smart basketball. And that's what we were hoping to see from this group. First half, I think, it's one of those things where you've got a group that's still working to build that cohesion, especially, Luka Bogovac, not being a part of what they did in those first 2 exhibitions. He was on the floor a lot in that first half. And so I do think that was part of it as well, was they were still kind of feeling some things out. Once they settled into the game, though, it was completely different. They held on to the ball a lot better. They started attacking the rim a lot more, and it led to a lot of success beyond the arc because you were getting much better looks. So, I mean, yeah, everything in that second half changed because you were able to hold on to the basketball. So credit to this group for being coachable, and credit to the coaching staff for getting on them. And that's something that I think we're going to like about this group this year is that they are very coachable. It's felt like teams in the last few years just haven't necessarily responded to the coaching that they are getting from Hubert Davis and from the staff. This group feels elective.
Yeah, let's get now to our thoughts and takeaways from tonight's game, and we'll continue with the explosive second half that fueled Carolina's comeback. You know, it's one thing when you shoot 66% from the field against Central Arkansas, if they do it next Tuesday against Radford, Navy, ECU, whoever. You did it against Kansas, and Kansas is Kansas. Thanks
for that.
They proved tonight, even in this defeat, that's a top 20 basketball team. They're going to be very competitive. Are they going to win the Big 12? No, they're not. But they've got the size and the length and the athleticism that you're used to seeing that Jayhawk program have, and Carolina just simply overwhelmed them. I mean, it all started with a commitment of just getting to the rim. Too many times in the first half, Carolina got bogged down in the half court, had to settle for a contested perimeter jump shot that would not go in. And from the moment that Carolina came out in the second half, you start off with the Visar dunk, and that led to another dunk and a layup and a layup and another dunk and another dunk. And it just set the tone to where Kansas had no resistance. And Carolina, you know, schematically, did they do anything that was exceptionally great? I'll say no. They just got in a horn set. They flexed off of it and just picked Kansas apart like Thanksgiving Day turkey. You know, to a point where they were shooting 78% from the field in the second half at one point.
Yep.
That's really hard to do no matter what level of competition that you're playing against. And, you know, I kind of said out loud that second half is maybe the best half Carolina's played under Hubert Davis. The only other thing that comes to mind is the final game of Coach K's career at Cameron, where Carolina scored, I think, 53 points in that second half in the win that secured themselves a spot in the NCAA tournament. And when we previewed the game, I told you that, you know, this game, which could feel and be a lot to this team, what it was to that 2018-19 team when they played Gonzaga. And I got that vibe from Carolina because their spurt ability, this group is very reminiscent of that year's team, where that team, it felt like at any point could score 10 points in 45 seconds. They could go on a 12-2 run in a minute and 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. And you know, Carolina went on an 18-0 run in the opener against Central Arkansas, already topping the biggest individual run than what they secured last year. And you look at what they did here in the second half tonight. At one point, they were on a 27-9 run, and while shooting north of 70% from the field. And so, you know, that second half is as good as this program has played under Hubert Davis. It gives you vibes of a team that was kind of built the same way this team is built, supposed to run up and down the floor, shoot a bunch of threes, get some dunks in transition. And I think that's why the vibes are really, really high because, first off, Carolina is good, but Carolina's going to look good while they're winning because they're going to play such a fun style.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that you're looking for, right? You're looking to be entertained by this team. And winning is entertaining, but especially when you've got the perimeter shooting that Carolina has. This is the thing that I think is great about tonight. Tonight validates everything that you went out and did in the offseason. Because the length showed up on the glass. That's what kept you in the game in the first half. And the perimeter shooting showed up in the second half, which is what you paid for. People said, why did you pay $14 million for this roster? That's the reason you paid $14 million for this roster, was because of what you saw tonight. And that is the type of game for Carolina that you want to see them play the remainder of the season. Do you want to see things maybe a little more balanced because you don't know if you're going to get a second half like that? Yeah, of course. But if you're going to be able to shoot the ball from the perimeter like that, if you're going to be able to rebound the way that you did tonight, I feel pretty good about where Carolina is going to be this season overall. And there were some guys in the first half that I thought really struggled, but stepped up as the night went along. Kyan Evans, you know, thought in the first half, the confidence was a little shaky, but I do think that as the game went along, he really found himself, started taking some confident shots from the outside. They started going. And that was big for Carolina because that opened a lot of things up. Then I thought Luka Bogovac hit a big three as well for Carolina. That was something that was important too because he was playing a lot out there in that first half. Wasn't bringing much on the offensive end of the floor. It felt like he was getting the ball, trying to get it out of his hands. There were a couple of times where he didn't. He took some contested shots. But I didn't love the shot selection because I thought he could have tried to drive to the basket when he was getting matched up against Flory Badunga. But in the second half, he settles in, looks a lot more like himself, is moving the basketball really well. So, I mean, yeah, that second half, just all around, the ball movement was fantastic. Attacking the rim was exactly what they needed to do to start things out because it opened up the perimeter. And you could see guys from the outside really settle into the game as it went along and hit big three after big three. And boy, I'm going to tell you, one thing that I really like is having a 5-man that can stretch the floor because having that really changes everything for Carolina. It's basically like you can play positionless basketball, which is something that Carolina needs in the modern era.
Well, that's what Hubert Davis wants to play. It's the way he wants to play, and he finally has a roster can play that way. And they're still, I think, learning how to get the most out of all these different bigs and utilize them to the best of their abilities. But that's where we'll transition next. There was a lot of concern about Henry Visar's toughness after posting a 14-point, 10-rebound double-double and shooting 67% from the floor against Central Arkansas. He was the best big man on the floor tonight for Carolina in a game where he needed to be. We talked about that when we previewed the game, but he had 20 points, 8 of 12 shooting, was 2 of 5 from 3, grabbed 4 rebounds in 37 minutes, and he was the guy that paced what Carolina did on the interior, where they were plus 28, 48 to 20 points in the paint, but plus 12 on the glass, 39 to 27. There aren't many times you could look at Carolina and say that they overwhelmed an opponent that is similar in stature like them on the glass or on the interior. But that's quite literally what they did. Their ability to rebound kept them in the game in the first half because they were up, I think it was like plus 10 on the glass in the first 20 minutes. And then in the second half, once, as I mentioned, Carolina got into some of their half-court sets, running a lot of horns with the flex stuff off of it, it just opened up driving lanes, and Carolina drove the ball to the lane as well as they have in quite some time. And so, got to give Henry Visar a ton of credit. When I sent out my tweet with my initial thoughts of the game, I said he was the right transfer portal edition big man that Carolina acquired this offseason. And that does make a lot of sense because that was the guy they targeted the most. He was their most coveted big man in the transfer portal, and they got him here. And look, he's not a perfect big. I do think he has to work on some of the fouls that he does commit. I think there needs to be – he's got to get coached up on when he's backing someone down and when to anticipate that double team that's going to get thrown his way and how to pass out of it. But he sets the tone with the way that he sets screens, the way that he runs the floor, the way that he fights for position. There's an emotional element with him as well that I think the fan base feeds off of, his teammates feed off of. And he really led the charge for a dominant performance for Carolina down low where they outscored Kansas 48 to 20 in the paint, plus 12 on the glass. And it's a big reason why we're sitting here tonight having a fun victory recap podcast.
Well, and one other area where I think he really showed up was late in that first half when Carolina needed someone in the half court that could score the ball when Caleb Wilson was off the floor. He was the one guy that was able to get a couple of baskets there and keep Carolina around. Because if that lead balloons to 13, 15, that's a lot harder to come back from than being down 8. And so credit to him for making those shots. I love the touch that he has as well around the rim. I think that, he finds a way to navigate the ball in a way that guys the last couple of years just haven't been able to do. And so I think that touch around the rim is going to help for the entire season. And then you get to that second half where Carolina's just throwing him lobs right out of the gate, and he's finishing every single one of them. We talked about it, finishing strong inside. That's what looks different about this year's team than a year ago, where a year ago you didn't have the athletes to be able to do what you did tonight when you're attacking the rim. So, I mean, yeah, he was really good. I know there are going to be people that are going to complain. He only had 4 rebounds in this game. He should have had more rebounds. But I think he did everything that he needed to do. He was really good against Flory Badunga, who I think is one of the better big men that Carolina will face all season long, is one of the more underrated big men in college basketball. I mean, he held him to 4 of 9 from the field.
Yeah.
Where there were a couple of times early in the game where it looked like, ooh, Flory might be settling in here. He might be able to have some success. So really like what we saw from him. Great bounce back after, he struggled a little bit against Coakeda in the game exhibition against BYU. I thought he really responded there tonight. And I think he heard some of what people were saying about him, that he was a little bit of a softer big, that he wasn't necessarily the type of guy that would be able to handle the physicality that he was going to see in some of these games that Carolina was going to play against some of these some top competition. He handled it tonight. He's going to be perfectly fine. And I think Carolina got the big man that they were looking for. There is no question in my mind that he is the right fit for this group. And I think you look at it, we were talking about who's going to be the leading scorer. We've got our answer in Caleb Wilson. Who's going to be that second leading scorer? Is Henry Visar going to be that guy? Because he's looked like that through the first 2 games of the season.
Yeah, there's definitely potential there. Do I want it to be? No, I think you need to get one of your guards to become that guy. Or I do think once Luka, they just figure out how to utilize him and he gets more settled. You could see tonight where he felt more in rhythm. The shots just got to start falling down. Now we got to get to maybe the biggest reason why Carolina was able to come back and win the game. And yeah, Caleb Wilson was sensational, and Henry Visar was a grown man on both ends of the floor. Carolina doesn't win this game if Kyan Evans doesn't grow up, if he doesn't play the second half the way that he played. Don't know what was said. I imagine, maybe when I go back and re-listen to Hubert's presser, he'll let it be known. You'll imagine a lot of that stuff will be kept indoors. There's no doubt in my mind, though, that when he went into the locker room, he got challenged. Quite simply, he had to nut up. There had to be a grow up moment for him because, Ashton texted me. He just got out of practice when the game went to halftime, and what are your thoughts? And I texted him, Kyan Evans might be bad. This could be on the table because he did not look good. He looked, I thought, intimidated. I thought he looked scared of the moment at times. It's the second time I've watched him in person of the ball get ripped away at half court. Winston-Salem State's, in the exhibition. And then, of course, here tonight, it's a little bit more understandable when a Kansas guard does it. But that's now twice in 3 games where you can't get the ball across half court. He was tentative. He was not taking shots that were there for him to take because he didn't have any confidence. And then something happened. And in the second half, you saw the Kyan Evans that I told you could be an all-ACC caliber guard. You saw the Kyan Evans that I told you if he played the way that he played down the stretch at Colorado State, at Carolina, this guy could flirt with All-American status. He made some perimeter jump shots. Once he got into the rhythm and the flow of the game, his ability to drive the ball through and around Kansas's defense and get to the rim and finish and draw. I think there was 2 times he got goaltendings where he was just able to maneuver his way to the basket and lay it up. Was absolutely sensational. I think it's going to be a journey, and it's going to be an experience. It's probably going to be late December, early January before he's playing at a steady level, because there's an adjustment and an acclimation period right now he's going through. But I think the second half also revealed that when he gets going, when it makes the game easier for Caleb Wilson, Visar, Trimble was able to get a bunch of easy buckets. It does elevate Carolina's ceiling. And so I was really happy for him. I was really proud of him because He's been criticized a lot through 4 games, 2 of them that count. A lot of people thought maybe Carolina had invested in the wrong point guard, but you saw the vision from this coaching staff when he played the way he played in the second half, because he was the best guard on the court on the court for either team.
We talked about the guys that responded to the challenges from this staff, and I think this was the main guy that responded in the locker room to whatever was said at halftime. And it probably was something as simple as just trust yourself. We brought you in here for a reason. No one's taking your job. Like, Derek Dixon is good. He's shown that, he can play as a freshman, but he's not coming for your job. So go out there and make the plays that are available to you. And I thought in the second half, you saw that. I mean, Carolina, we talked about 1 turnover in the second half. That doesn't happen without your point guard that's doing everything that he needs to do. And again, you saw in the second half why there's just so much more to his game than what Elliot Cadeau brought to the table.
Yep.
Because what he does offensively, his ability to score the ball, get to the rack, and draw those goaltends, and then hit some shots from the outside. He hit a couple of big threes that really set the tone for Carolina in that second half. So he deserves a ton of credit, man. Am I the guy that thinks that he is the best guy that Carolina could have gotten in the transfer portal? In terms of just sheer talent, no. But if you look at the fit for this roster, this might be the best fit that they could have possibly gotten in the portal. And this is a guy that, as we said, I think he's going to get better as the year goes along. I really do.
Yeah.
And so, once we get to December, January, especially once we get into February and March, if he's playing his best basketball, well, then guess what? No one's going to care. It doesn't matter. And the thing is that even tonight, on a night where he did not have a good first half, he responded. There were, with the previous point guard, there were a lot of times where when he would start a game out poorly, there was no response. The confidence, it was the same issue, but the confidence would never return to him. Tonight, you saw it return to him. He became a big part of what Carolina did in that second half, and that is ultimately why they were able to win the game. You talked about just the ability to wind through that defense and get to the basket. I thought that was really what surprised me the most about him, because we knew that he could shoot it. But, I mean, that ability to be so crafty with the ball and just find a way to get to the basket really impressed me tonight. I thought that was fantastic from Kyan.
Don't have a lot of time to spend a lot of time on what I want to touch on next, because we got to get to our discussion topics before we do get out. But you got to mention the contribution that you got from Jaren Stevenson. I thought his timely rebounding,
yes,
his defense is going to be, it's not going to be as underappreciated as it was for Leaky Black, but it's going to be underappreciated because I don't think people understand how hard he works defensively. It's a different feel when you watch him in person, and you're watching him just fight through screen after screen and closing out on shooters on the perimeter. So got to give him a shout out. Zayden High, I thought, gave Carolina some productive minutes. It's going to be that's going to be the same level as Kyan Evans, but so it's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster with him because he plays with so much of the energy that he just plays too fast at times. But gave Carolina a big 3, did some good things defensively. Jonathan Powell showed up, made some perimeter shots. Those were necessary. Derek Dixon, I thought, was able to come in and just stable Carolina at certain times when Kyan Evans had to come out of the game. And so you saw the depth of this team really come up in big ways in the first half when Trimble and Caleb Wilson were in foul trouble. You needed those guys to step up. And then in the second half, well, yes, Hubert Davis was riding his starters, but you had to supplement those guys, give those guys a little bit of rest. There was never a lull. There was never a time where once Carolina really took control of the game, that 10-0 run, made Kansas take that time out at 58-48, Kansas really never got back in the ball game. And that's a credit to those guys off the bench. And that's something that we talked about in the preseason. This is the deepest Carolina has been under Hubert Davis. And it's the first time there could be a sustained level of play across 40 minutes. And you saw that really show up in a big way tonight. So Those are some unsung heroes that need to be shouted out because they did play a role in Carolina coming away with this win tonight over the Kansas Jayhawks. Let's now get to our discussion topics before we do get out of this edition of the podcast because it's running late. We both need to take showers. We both have articles to write. And we got a football game to get prepared for tomorrow. So let's circle back to Hubert and what this win means. As a sports fan, there are two things in my life I am concerned with the most. With my NFL team, it's my quarterback establishing himself as a franchise quarterback. I'm a Panther fan. I worry about that with Bryce Young. With North Carolina, it's Hubert Davis cementing himself as the rightful guy to lead a program that I love, that I care about, that I worship, and that determines my mind from November through March. I wanted this win for Caleb Wilson. I wanted this win for Henry Visar. I wanted this win for myself because of what Kansas caused me with all the losses from previous times. I wanted this win for Hubert Davis. I wanted him to have that moment of being on the sidelines in a jam-packed arena that was as loud as maybe I've ever heard it in all my times coming to watch Carolina play basketball. I wanted him to be the coach that had that moment. And I think this could be, if Hubert goes on to have a 15 to 20-year career and wins 700 games, takes Carolina to multiple Final Fours, national championships, so on and so forth, I think this will be the game that we'll look back and say, that's when Carolina basketball became Carolina basketball under Hubert Davis. And I cannot express how happy I am for him. Because when I checked my Twitter at halftime and I sent out my halftime thoughts, there it was. He was getting blamed. There were people complaining about Hubert. People are already saying Jim Tanner should be fired, so on and so forth. Those guys were nowhere to be found in the second half when Carolina played the way that they played. But I do think, this was a big moment for Hubert. And it was fun watching him get that win and outcoach a two-time national champion and a Hall of Famer like Bill Self.
Yeah, and a guy that we have just grown to sports hate because he has been so successful against Carolina. So to see him have that moment and go up against one of the best in the sport, because even with the struggles that he's had recently, he is still one of the best in the sport. And Hubert outcoached him tonight. That was amazing to watch. And yeah, I mean, it's so big, man. I mean, in terms of where it ranks, it can't be the biggest win of his career because the biggest win of his career was beating Duke in a Final Four game. So it can't be. But as you said, it could be the moment where you say things started to turn for Carolina basketball under Hubert Davis. And this is where they start to become more consistent. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that. That's the one thing that I want to make clear here is that I'm not guaranteeing that that's going to happen just based off of tonight. But this is one of the highest moments that we felt under Hubert Davis, probably the highest moment that we felt under him since that win in the Final Four. And that's shocking to say because you were a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament just a couple of years ago. But it feels like this one was so important. And yes, I wanted this for all of these guys. I wanted it for the program in general. Of course, selfishly, you want it for yourself because Kansas has ripped your heart out so many times. But this is a guy that we have both said we are behind him no matter what at this point. We want this to work out because this is the best thing possible for Carolina basketball as this works out and that he ends up being the guy that can take Carolina to the places that Roy Williams and Dean Smith have taken them. Frank McGuire took them to as well. So I think tonight is a step in the right direction. I'm not saying that all of a sudden now we've got a national championship winning head coach here, but you've taken a step towards that. You got to win at home that you needed to against a Kansas team that was ranked ahead of you. This is step one. Now it's about building on this throughout the rest of the season. But it feels like I'm more confident in this team than a lot of the other teams that we have had under Hubert Davis. It just feels like something's a little bit different with this group. You've got the special freshmen, but again, it feels like this team really rallies around its head coach, and I think that's what's going to be the difference.
And another thing that this win sparked was a lot of we're back conversation, and not to the same level of what Texas and Notre Dame football endured after a decade of irrelevancy. But there were, former Carolina players. Ty Lawson tweeted about the win saying we're back. There was that feeling and that vibe and that conversation in the arena on the bus ride home. And, we were talking with our guy, Josh Grant from WSJS, and you were like, well, where'd they ever go? 2 years ago, you were a 1 seed. 4 years ago, you were a rebound away from winning a national championship. Did Carolina basketball ever leave? And in reality, that answer is no. Because they have achieved and done some good stuff under Hubert Davis, just not enough consistency because we've been spoiled for the last 60+ years. But I think when you hear that, when you see that, when people type that, text that, no matter what it is, there's a vibe, there's a feeling, there's a energy. And as someone that has lived and died with this program since the 6th grade, I see where they're coming from. Because Carolina, when you look at them, they look like a Carolina basketball team. They're big, they're long, they're athletic, they're fast. And then the way that they play like a Carolina basketball team. And because of some of the stuff they do defensively, it's even a throwback to what, older generation like my dad grew up watching, where Carolina's going to full court press. They're going to run and trap. They're going to do some stuff out of the timeouts and all that stuff. And I think that's a callback too, where it just, what it is? It's Hubert Davis doing what he was hired to do, which was blend the two coaches that came before him, that laid the foundation, that laid the groundwork for what we want in our program. And so I think that is fun. And I think that is something cool to be, because that's going to be what gets Carolina fans 100% behind him, is having that feeling of this is what we know our team's going to look like every single night. And look, 2 years ago was a lot of fun. That was a really good team, but they didn't give you the type of feelings this early in the season that this group has. And I think that's something where we've watched this team play now 4 times, and we can identify and say, oh, that's Carolina basketball, and that's pretty cool to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think, part of it is that, Carolina just they had a stretch where, again, they're adjusting to everything that's going on in this era of college basketball. And that's okay, man, especially, Hubert Davis, who could he turn to and ask for advice when it came to the NIL era of college basketball? He can't turn to anybody. I mean, the closest you can turn to is Roy Williams, but Roy wouldn't even be able to keep up with everything that is going on and everything that is changing. So it just took him a little bit of time. Now he has his team. Chad Crosby says it on Facebook, that this really feels like it's his team because of the money that they spend. And I think it's just because of the evaluation process that they went through when it came to this roster. They have found guys that respond to their head coach, and now you've got a group that you can truly believe in. And when it comes to the we're back conversation, I get where people are coming from. But my thing is that it's different. It's a different we're back. The feeling of we're back to being a top 5 caliber team, like one of the best teams in the country. I can see that. There's no doubt that there is a little bit of a bravado that might be a little bit different for Carolina, going throughout the rest of the year, or at least going, for the next few games after this win over Kansas that we haven't felt in a while. But this team hasn't been that far away from that for too long. That's the thing. It's not Miami. We're not saying, oh, is the U back? As you mentioned, Texas. Is Texas back? We've heard that so many times before, and I just hate that because every time that we ask that question of is so-and-so back, it always feels like they're not back, right? So I don't want to be that next team that we ask that question about, are they back? And then it turns out they're not. Maybe that's just a little paranoia from me, but I also think, man, 2 years ago, you were a 1 seed. And that team really felt like it played well for Coach Davis because it felt like they responded to what he did. This year's team feels very similar. The difference might be is you've got one of the best players in the country on your team in Caleb Wilson that everybody's going to be talking about. I think that might be what's ultimately a little bit different.
The last thing we'll touch on, and then we'll finally wrap this thing up and get out of here. Didn't pick Carolina to win the ACC. I picked Louisville. I had Duke second, Carolina third. Didn't go on record and say Carolina was going to make the Final Four, but did say they had a Final Four ceiling if this whole thing came together. I do think there was a message that was sent tonight, and that's maybe more of the we're back thing, is that I think fans are confident in saying that, no, we're going to be right there with Duke and Louisville this year, competing for an ACC regular season title. We're going to be a perennial top 10 team that's going to be in discussion for a 1 or a 2 seed come Selection Sunday, which is quite frankly where we expect to be, as opposed to sweating it out and being the last team into the NCAA tournament field, which is where Carolina has been. They've been a bubble team every year but one so far under Hubert Davis. And so when you do whether you won the game or not, or whether, no matter how you won the game, there was going to be a message sent. But I think with the way Carolina did it in the second half, where they just flat out overwhelmed a Kansas team that I think is going to be better than most people expect, with the freshman that's been highly regarded more than our own freshmen. I do think there was a message that was sent, and I think it's just the beginning for a team that I think, the thing they have now, and it's the most important thing that you got to have, is they have belief. They have belief that they can go anywhere and play with any team in the country. And when you have that belief to go along with the talent, with the coaching acumen, then I think we're going to be in store for a really fun season. And so I do believe Carolina sent a subtle message tonight to the ACC and the college basketball world. Y'all slept on us during the offseason. You underrated us, but we're going to be forced to be reckoned with over the next 5 months.
I mean, hell, I was one of the guys that slept on them a little bit. I said that the ceiling for this team I thought was an Elite Eight. I think that ceiling has changed. I think you could see this team making the Final Four. And maybe it was because I didn't believe that what you would get from Caleb Wilson. I didn't want to get hurt by having such lofty expectations and him not being able to respond to how lofty my expectations were. He's outshined him so far. And I know it's still early in the season, but I really feel like, as you said, he's just scratching the surface. And when you've got a player of that caliber, it feels like for the first time in a while, I think, when was the last time we could feel this way? Marcus Page? Like, that's really what it brings to my mind, is that was the last time that you were so confident in a guy that you just knew night in and night out when you took the court, you were going to be able to compete with anybody in college basketball. That's the feeling that I get with this team. I love the secondary pieces that they have around them. I told you, I think Visar is a guy that is showing you that he has the capability of being the second leading scorer. I love what we're seeing both offensively and defensively from Seth Trimble. Here's the thing. Might not be great in the first half. Wasn't great in the first half against Central Arkansas. Wasn't great in the first half of the game tonight. Stepped up in the second half and looked really good. If that's what you're going to be, then that's going to be perfectly fine for me. So, I think this is a team that you've gotten to the point now where if you're a Carolina fan, you can beat your chest a little bit and feel confident in your group. And you're right. Really, outside of 2 years ago, could you do that with a Hubert Davis team in his time at Carolina? No. There were guys that we really liked. And this is an era that we're still going to remember with guys like RJ and Armando Bacot, Caleb Love during the run to the Final Four. But it's different. It's a little bit different this time. And it's exciting to feel that again about a player like Caleb Wilson, because it brings, kind of brings us back to when we were a little bit younger, when we were, still just fresh out of high school, in college, just getting ready to start doing the Four Corners podcast. And that's something we haven't really gotten to feel. So I think it's going to be really cool. As you said, enjoy it, guys, because it probably is only going to be this year that we have Caleb Wilson here with us. And he is the guy that's giving you this great beacon of hope.
Yep, and it's going to set up what I think is going to be a fun year for us here on the podcast. A lot more happy Josh is what my buddy Josh Smilo was. He sent me a voice message today. The Smilos, we're not able to watch the game because of their Sabbath, but he said, I can't wait to hear happy Josh on the pod. He got to hear happy Josh because Carolina got a massive win over the Kansas Jayhawks, and I think we're just scratching the surface for what's going to be maybe from start to finish as fun a season as we've had here on the Four Corners podcast. With that, guys, we're going to wrap up this edition of the show. It's been a real long day for yours truly. In the meantime, we will direct you guys to the website, HeelToughVlog.com. The Kansas recap will be posted on Saturday morning, so be on the lookout for that article, as I'll go a little bit more in depth on how Carolina was able to take down the Kansas Jayhawks tonight in the Smith Center. Anthony will be getting you ready with the matchup with Stanford on the football field as Carolina looks to sweep the weekend and get two big wins between their two big athletic programs. So make sure you're staying locked into HeelToughVlog.com, the latest and the best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners podcast and will pop up. There, we encourage you rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the regular season. If you're a video consumer of the podcast, the best way to get notified when we go live, like and follow us on Facebook at Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. When we go live, you'll get a notification sent to you, and you can jump right in and hear any of our coverage of Carolina basketball. So with that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.